Officer, there she goes. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. I think I see it recorded now. Yep, okay. All right, here we go. So make sure I'm at the right one. Okay. So now we are on section 20.2.50, general provisions. Under section A, general requirements, excuse me. And I believe it looks like it's only enemy D's position on A1. And then I believe again, members, please check me on A2 because IPA&M withdrew its proposal. So then 3 looks like we have enemy D paragraphs 3 through 8. Look here. Okay, we have some discussion on that 3 through 8. So before that, though, we have some sections where there's no opposition. Would members of the board, I would love to entertain a motion. Yes, Member Garcia.
I would move that the board adopt section 112A, 1 and 2 as written for the evidence proffered by enemy D.
Would second that.
Thank you, Member Garcia, and Member Bitzer for your second. If there's no, let me make sure, you know, the cameras aren't on yet for some of the other members. Yes, Member Duval. Great. So if we're good, I'm just looking to make sure no members have any questions or discussion points on these. If not, Ms. Jones, would you mind doing a roll call vote on this motion from Member Garcia and a second from Member Bitzer?
Yes. Member Bitzer, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Member Cates?
Yes. Yes.
Member Duval?
Yes.
Member Garcia?
Yes.
Member Honker?
Yes.
Vice Chair Trujillo Davis?
I'm going to abstain because I missed the motion.
Chair Sweeney?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes with 1 abstention.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And so we are under 112A 3 through 8. And we have enemy D's position and text. And looks like we do have some discussions from the other parties with IPA&M proposing to delete. Sorry, I'm going back and forth here. Correct me if I'm wrong, sorry. So we have 3 through 9. And then IPA&M proposing to delete 9 in its entirety. But then we have GCA supporting enemy D's removal on A3.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
This is Felicia. IPA&M proposes to delete paragraphs 3 through 9 in their entirety.
Okay, so not just section 9. Is that correct? I think it was.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. So just in terms of record, I don't know, I know you had asked for some revisions. Can you go to, let's see, go to IPA section under this, 3 through 8. I just want to make sure. Yes. Right. Yeah. So right there, oh,
I'm sorry, what section are we on? I lost my place in the last discussion.
so we are on section 112A 3 through 9.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much, Madam Hearing Officer. There was another section under, I think, the NMED summary, where it talks about at the end of NMED summary. So that's where I got right there, where it was only section 9. I didn't scroll all the way down. Apologize to the board. Members of the board, if you want to start discussion on this, we have industry suggested deletions, industry suggested additions. I don't know how you want to tackle this one. I know, Madam Hearing Officer, this one looks like had different, then we have Wild Earth Guardians as well, with some additions on here. Members of the board, how would do you want to take this number by number, or well, or do you just want to jump in and start discussing each NMED's proposal? I'm open to, we're open to however you want to jump in on this one.
This is a big section. Maybe we should go number by number.
Okay. Okay. So let's start with section 3. Within 2 years of the effective date of this part, and 3 has subparts A, B, C, D, E, F. So, Madam Hearing Officer, on this section, I know the summaries just summarizes, multiple numbered sections. Is it easy to do one by one on this in your recollection on capturing the testimony and various points of the parties?
Well, so the way the department set out their support was by breaking paragraphs 3 through 8 into one discussion, which, by the way, starts on page 60 of the hard copy of the attachment. And then they address IPA&M's proposal to delete paragraphs 3 through 8 in their entirety. That's starting at the bottom of page 61 in the hard copy. Then the department addresses paragraph 9 and IPA&M's proposal to delete paragraph 9. GCA is supportive of the department's A3. They wanted to specifically comment on the removal of the EMT requirements. CDG supports supports much of 112A and C, and has its own proposal around the word data system versus database system. NMOCA proposed a number of changes in paragraphs 3 through 9, most of which NMED adopted in its final proposal. And on page 65 of the hard copy, I mentioned the only two changes that were not adopted by NMED. Then you have the discussion around IPA&M proposing to delete 3 through 9 in their entirety. NMOGA sort of providing, I would say, additional support for some of what IPA&M is doing. And then the proposal from Wild Earth Guardians, which would come after 9 and be a new A12. So I suspect that the best way to do this would be to decide whether you want to keep paragraphs 3 through 8 at all, whether you want to keep paragraph 9 at all, knowing about IPA&M and NMOGA's objections. If then you choose to keep them, you could address the more minor adjustments, for example, that NMOGA and that other party would make. Where was the other little adjustment around database? CDG, because those are minor adjustments once you've actually decided to keep them. The more existential question is whether you want to have paragraphs 3 through 9 at all.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. Appreciate that summary. Members of the board, yes, Member Garcia?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I do recall extensive time spent on this during the hearing. And I recall that the department also negotiated through this before the hearing and made some changes. And then it looks like some of the parties wanted additional changes, which it looks like NMED accommodated, and I can see that that those changes are supported. So it looks like various parties support a lot of the changes NMED made. Some want NMED to make more changes, and then IPA wants the whole thing thrown out, that section 3 through 9. So I guess I feel pretty good that the department, I do recall that the department went through this extensively with industry. I remember they made some changes, and I suppose they came to agreement on most things, but as you know, as it happens, not everybody's happy with what you end up with, but they did compromise quite a bit. So I guess I'm leaning towards including 3 through 9 in the rule. So that would mean that I'm rejecting IPA&M's proposal to eliminate it.
Thank you, Member Garcia. Member Cates?
Yeah, I agree with all that. Member Garcia says it much better than I can or could have. And I would pull back from this and reiterate that a lot of negotiation already went into this. The state, the department sought compromise. It seemed to have gotten compromise from most parties. IPA&M seems to want the whole ball of wax here, and that's not usually how compromise goes. And I am just generally in favor of compromise, and I think that this, the language as written, is a good compromise.
Thank you, Member Cates. Member Duval?
yeah, looking at, 3 through 5, this is really standard operating procedure. I mean, I don't think any of this is overly burdensome at all. I mean, this is just good practice and good data reposition, or will allow for people to evaluate how things are done. And I don't think, and like, all of this is SOP. So I fully agree that this needs to stay included.
Thank you, Member Duval. Is there any other discussion? Member Honker.
Yes, I agree as well. I mean, it's basic record keeping, which is essential to any sort of a program like this. So I definitely think we should keep through 9.
Thank you, Member Honker. Vice Chair Trujillo Davis.
I don't remember which my fellow board members said this, but I also agree that there was quite a bit of negotiation that went into this section, and there was a lot of compromise made and by all parties. So I think it should remain as it has been rewritten and is presented to us currently.
Thank you, Member Trujillo Davis. So I think to jump off from where Vice Chair Trujillo Davis mentioned, all of the discussion, the negotiation that went through on this particular section, are you leaning toward adopting it, and then now as NMED has framed it in their last submittals? I'm just wondering about the other sections or the other stakeholders, now that if we're going to consider keeping it, how you want to move through that discussion. Or if there's no discussion on that. Yes, Member Bitzer.
Wondering if maybe the hearing officer or counsel can advise, but it seems to me that the appropriate thing to do is to have a motion to reject the deletion of sections 3 through 8 and section 9. Maybe we can make that one motion. Maybe that has to be 2. But wouldn't that be the first course of action?
Chair Sweeney, I would suggest that consistent with what we've done for other sections, if the intent of the board is to reject the deletion, the motion can be to adopt the board's the department's proposed language based on their proffered rationale, because the rationale, as stated, included here in the report, addressed those deletions and why the department didn't agree with them to begin with.
Ms. Soloria, I believe he's referring to the fact that there were 4 minor adjustments offered in the event the paragraphs were not deleted. And should the board take each of those 4 minor adjustments up before they make the larger motion?
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer, for that clarification. I would suggest that I think you should take the minor clarifications up first, so it's clear what language you're voting on. So yes, separate them, and so that what you're voting on is settled.
I'm happy to address them while we're looking at this screen if you'd like.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. That'd be helpful.
All right, the first one, these are proposed edits by CDG. There are two of them. They're on the page 64 of the hard copy. They would insert the words looking at the end of A5, so right here, would insert after at the very end of that sentence there, as required by 20.2.50.112 C3 and 112 D. The other edit they propose is to change data system to database system throughout. So those are the two edits proposed by CDG. Then NMOGA, while we're looking at it, at the end of paragraph 5, a similar edit actually to what CDG proposed first, as required by paragraph 3 of subsection C and subsection D of 20.2.50.1112 and MAC. So they're making the same suggestion right there. Their second suggestion is to delete the word contemporaneously in paragraph 8 before the word track. So right here, contemporaneously track. They believe the word contemporaneously is ambiguous.
Madam Hearing Officer, can you go back to the, just so I'm clear here, so on the CDG, inserting as required by 20.2, what you had just described, C section 3 and 112D at the end of paragraph A5. At the end of the summary, it says that hearing transcript proposal by CDG, and then afterwards acceptance by NMED. So what, I don't know if you can go to that section on page 64 of our hearing of the attachment there. So I guess my question is, so if it was accepted, why wasn't it put in the last version by NMED?
Let's see here, acceptance by NMED. So that may well, so it refers to Ms. Bisbee Keene there. We would look in the transcript, which I'm happy to do. I imagine that that was a response to a cross-examination question. And that particular reference is to the change from data system to database system, or vice versa.
So
my impression is that the language about being required by section C and D proposed by both CDG and NMOGA is offered as more of a clarifying change, but CDG doesn't address it right there. Let me see if NMOGA says anything about it. So what NMOGA says about this language, and I can scroll down to it, see, it's on page 65, is the data systems can be one or more systems so long as they are capable of producing the compliance data report within the required time frame. NMOGA appreciates the new terminology. NMOGA is supportive of CDG's suggested language addition. That language there about as required by section C and D. So let me, I have to go past all this IPA stuff here to get to it. Well, now there we go. As required, right, by C3 and D.
I guess I was just a little bit confused, and Member Garcia, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the original question of, I thought that what we have been doing, and please, I may have missed a nuance there, hearing officer, but I thought that the way we've been doing this is where there's several changes proposed, including elimination, et cetera. If we adopt the section as is, as written, then by definition, we are rejecting all those proposed changes. And so what we've been doing is we've not gone through individual proposed changes and voted on them. What we've done is, it seems to me, but I may be missing a nuance here that you identified and I missed it.
And I apologize, Member Garcia, I might be confused as well. I just want to make sure that if they, meaning the parties, were in alignment, I just want to make sure that that it was in alignment and then it was reflected in the final NMED text. Is that correct, Ms. Orth, on this particular point?
Yes. So,
Okay.
as you know, NMED was in negotiation with all other parties throughout the proceeding, and as you can see on the screen right here, when I was parsing NMOGA's final proposal in paragraphs 3 through 9, I noticed that their final red line included several changes that had already been incorporated by NMED. And so I didn't offer that to you here as, you know, some distinction to be drawn. It was incorporated. But then I felt I needed to identify the two changes proposed by NMOGA in their red line that had not been incorporated as part of NMED's final proposal.
Great, thank you. And then I think, apologize, fellow board members. I just wanted that clarification because I thought there was that consensus during the hearing. So I just wanted to make sure I was reading that correctly. That even though there was consensus, it was not provided as a final red line. Is that correct? Madam Hearing Officer, sorry.
I'm sorry, yes. So NMOGA proposed several changes in its final red line, most of which NMED had already incorporated in its final red line. The only two changes in NMOGA's final red line that were not in NMED's final red line are the two I've identified here. This business about as required by paragraph 3, and the business about deleting the word contemporaneously in paragraph 8.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that, Vice Chair. I know you want to. Yes, Ms. Solaria.
Was your point about it being accepted going to CDG's proposal of data? Okay, so I think, and the hearing officer would have more background on this, but I think you're suggesting that this excerpt here, it's suggested by what happened at the hearing was that the department accepted that during the hearing. And for one reason or another, it wasn't in the department's final proposal. And I'll note that they didn't appear to address that in their statement of reasons as well. I know that upon submission of their statement of reasons, there was the department didn't necessarily have time to didn't receive everyone's final version, other party's final version before they compiled their own statement of reasons. So this might be one of the hopefully narrow cases where something was compromised upon during the hearing, but wasn't necessarily captured in NMED's final red line. And I don't know if I've misrepresented that, but if that's the case, then I would think that the board could consider the actual record of what was agreed to at the hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Solaria. That's exactly where I'm getting to. And I just wasn't sure if I was confused and I was misreading the summary and some of the text and what we had sat through all the hearing. I just want to make sure if we got consensus on something and if there was some other reason that it was not incorporated in the final red line, that, you know, just in terms of transparency, with the public and those parties on the line and throughout all the hearings, that we have something of record of why it was, or if it was consensus, can we indeed address that at this point? So thank you so much, Mr. Lawler. Yes, Member Duval?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to make a quick point. If we could go, so as someone that deals with this on a daily basis, I really don't have an issue with the verbiage of data versus database. If you can go back down to, I think it was 0.5 that we were looking at before we went up to this language. What concern? Yes, this section. So the use of the term data or database does not really bother me at all. But upon request at the end of the statement, or at the end of that sentence, that's what bothers me. I mean, I think that should be more of a, shall be submitted on some, sort of regular basis. Like dealing with large, like these are not these are not uncomplicated data sets. I mean, this isn't just like a simple Excel sheet that somebody can just, email you at whenever you ask for it. I would like some more specific language as far as at least an update, or like a timeline, like some reporting period, not just like, oh well, yeah, we're going to trust you to be keeping good records, and whenever we ask for it, you're going to have it. I don't think that works all that well in these contexts. I think it would be much better to have like just put in the word annual or biannual, or some sort of more specific language as opposed to upon request. And I would also put raw data, because somebody has to process. This is coming off of some instrumentation. I mean, it's not like this just magically ends up in an Excel spreadsheet. This is getting pulled off of an instrument that has to get processed. And so I think that access to the raw data, if we're interested in absolute transparency, like that has to be available.
Thank you, Member Duval. Vice Chair Trujillo Davis.
Just to Member Duval's comments, I think I might be able to help shed some light on that. NMED has the ability to conduct an inspection at any time without announcement, and this gives them the wording upon request gives them the ability to request the data at the time of that surprise inspection, which I believe, and this is my interpretation of this section, actually makes it more restrictive, because they don't have, a company can't say, well, my report's not due till whatever date. They have to produce the information upon request during a surprise inspection. So I think that maybe might change the context a little bit.
Okay, no, yeah, Member Trujillo Davis, that makes it that helps me out. That helps me out a lot. Okay, that gives me some clarity there.
Thank you.
Yeah, my idea of upon request is like not that. Yeah, it was not the same framework that you just put it in. So I appreciate that. And
Thank
so,
you.
okay, I'm comfortable with that language now. After if that's your understanding of the articulation and that's what can happen, then I'm good with it.
Thank you, Member Duval. And Member Honker?
Yes, and just to echo what Vice Chair Trujillo Davis said, having worked in the regulatory arena a long time, this is not an unusual construction of a requirement. You've got to maintain the data there. You got to make it available when if the inspectors come around or if it's asked for. The regulatory agency doesn't necessarily want it submitted. That's an additional burden on the industry. Plus, if it comes into the agency, then they got to do something with it, and you've got to manage all that. So I think it's a fairly standard approach. But on the issue of data system and database system, I actually like the term data system better. It just sounds a little more flexible for the regulated community to utilize whatever they need. Database just sounds a little more formal and restricted to me. So I think I would vote to stay with data system as the department has proposed it.
Madam Chair, on that point, if I might.
Mhm.
So I may have, this report may have included a typographical error that I carried into it around the data system and database system. I have received communication from the two lawyers involved in that negotiation, and it appears that the department accepted the proposal from CDG and incorporated it, and no opposition there should have been shown.
Thank you for that. Yes, Member Duval.
I am already, so I really need to take off. And I will just, as a parting note, it made me absolutely cringe that 3.D clarifies things as in pounds per hour and didn't use metric system nomenclature. So I just want to be on the record that I think that should be changed to kilograms per hour instead of pounds per hour. But other than that, I will join you guys tomorrow morning, and thank you for your time. And I appreciate that you appreciate that I have other obligations.
Thank you, Member Duval. We'll see you tomorrow morning. And I believe a member had their hand up. Apologize if I missed you. Member Garcia.
Thank you, and I appreciate the hearing officer's clarification in that. I was thinking I was in the twilight zone here because I kept seeing it in the rule. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much, hearing officer. So with that, oh, wait. Did you have something?
Yes.
Yes, before you make a motion, I had one more question to clarify here. I remember a statement during this particular portion of the hearing, and I have notes on it. So I just want to see where I missed it, because I can't seem to find it in all this information. But I thought one of the things that they had agreed to during the hearing was to not have equipment tags on each piece of equipment, and I'm not sure if I'm seeing that reflected in the text. So I'm asking my fellow board members and
It is in there. Remember Trujillo Davis. It's in there.
that they
I can tell you
removed
what page,
it, or
but
that they
I just
kept
read it
it
a
in.
minute ago.
So it appears that it was kept in, And I'm curious if there was further discussion from the parties on the agreement to remove that portion of it.
Thank you.
I don't
yeah.
think it was cooked in.
And
I believe
I
it was
remember
removed.
this.
I believe it was removed.
Okay. Thank you. And I remembered it because I was surprised by the agreement. So I just wanted to make sure that I was indeed seeing the most current version, that it wasn't left out.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's on page 61.
Can we go to that just so I make sure that we're all on the same page? Oh yeah, the department removed the tagging and scanning requirements.
Thank you for helping me find that and for pointing it out. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. Right. So with that, is there any other discussion about this section? If not, and thank you all for those clarifications and Madam Hearing Officer for the clarification too on the typo or what got carried forward. I appreciate that. With that, I'm looking to members of the board if you have any other discussion items. If not, maybe entertain a motion. Yes, Member Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to adopt section 3 through 9 as written in the proposed rule with reasons stated by NMED.
Thank you, Member
Second.
Garcia. I apologize. Who was at that second? Member Cates, second.
Yeah.
With that, I'm looking to see if there's any other discussion. If not, Ms. Jones, would you mind doing a roll call vote?
Yes. Member Bitzer, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Member Cates?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Let's see, Member Duval is not with us. Member Garcia?
Yes.
Member Honker?
Yes.
Vice Chair Trujillo Davis?
Yes.
Chair Sweeney?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes with 6 yes and 1 member absent.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And Madam Hearing Officer, I know we're scrolling on to the next section here. I do want to get to, yeah, there we go. Section with Wild Earth Guardians proposal for a new section A12. And if we, I know Madam Hearing Officer has it up, but it's on page 69 of our hard copy for members of the board. This is a new section and looked at, yes, Member Honker.
Yeah, I read through all this and it seems like this proposed new section has to do with permitting policy and procedures, which really seems to be outside the scope of the rule we're working on here. Seems like that is not really the focus of this rule. So that would be better considered in permit rules elsewhere. So I'm inclined not to consider adding it.
Thank you for your input, Member Honker. Members of the board, do you have any other input? Yes, Vice Chair Trujillo Davis.
I'm inclined to agree with Member Honker. I apologize for my coworker back there making noise. But I'm inclined to agree with Member Honker here because I believe that this particular portion is slightly out of scope for this regulation. And I think there's some question on regulatory authority for incorporating it into this rule. And I'm not comfortable incorporating something that I feel is that far out of scope.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trujillo Davis. Is there any other discussion from our board members regarding this proposed new section? I'll give you a minute. I know let's see, in our attachment that we have in front of us, there's a lot of discussion on this, and with opposition of this proposal from NMED and CDG as well.
Yeah, I would also point out that NMED states that there's other regulations that already prohibit air quality permits for facilities causing to or contributing to exceedances of ozone NACs. That's near the bottom of page 70. So just want to make sure everybody was aware of that.
Thank you for that, Mr. Member Honker. There's no other discussion on this, or any other board members want to highlight any other written text submittals regarding this? And I just also want to echo what Member Honker and Vice Chair Trujillo Davis mentioned. You know, as we the regulated community has to abide by the regulations. If we're going beyond the regulatory authority, to get into gray areas and so forth. So I want to make sure that we stay in alignment with and support our department, the Mexico Environmental Department, and making sure we stay within those regulatory guidelines and guardrails. So I also support what Member Honker and Vice Chair Trujillo Davis mentioned. With that, yes, Member Garcia.
I just want to agree with my fellow board members that it's unnecessary to put in there. I'm afraid it would cause more problems than it would solve. So I would not agree with including that language. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Garcia. And with that, and if I may ask if we could entertain a motion or further discussion, yes, Member Honker.
Yeah, I will move that we reject the new section A12 that Wild Earth Guardians has proposed and use in light of the rationale presented by NMED on the issue.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Member Honker and Member Bitzer. There's no further discussion on this item. May I, Ms. Jones, could we have a roll call vote?
Yes, Member Bitzer, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
Member Cates,
Yes.
Member Garcia,
Yes.
Member Honker,
Yes.
Vice Chair Trujillo Davis,
Yes.
Chair Spina.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes with one member absent.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. With that, I just want to do another check with our board members. Is everybody good? Nobody needs any breaks or anything? We're good to keep moving? Good. Okay. So next, we're on section 10. Hearing officer has it up on the screen as well. And we don't, it looks like it's NMED's, the department's position on 10, 11. And there looks to be no opposition. Wondering if we could get a motion regarding these particular two sections. And I double check me, fellow board members, that there's no opposition. I don't see any.
It looks good. I would make a motion to adopt 10 and 11 for reasons stated by NMED.
Yes.
I
Second
think
that.
there's, I think there's opposition on 11 B, subsection B from Kinder Morgan.
B is the start of a new section, if I'm correct in that.
Yeah.
So
That's
we're on
correct, Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was 11B. I apologize.
You're good. You're good, Vice Chair. So I think we had a second by Member Bitzer. Is that correct yes, on Member Cates's motion? With that, if there's no further discussion, could we have a roll call vote on that?
Yes, Member Bitzer,
I'll vote yes.
Member Cates,
Yes.
Member Garcia,
Yes.
Member Honker,
Yes.
Vice Chair Trujillo Davis,
Yes.
Chair Swina.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes with one member absent.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. All right, new section here, section B. Monitoring requirements. Looks like as Vice Chair Trujillo Davis mentioned, we have NMED's position, and then we have Kinder Morgan's position, as well as
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. When I'm screen sharing, it's really hard not to step on the end of your sentence. I'm very sorry.
Sure.
Kinder Morgan is supportive here because NMED moved toward its proposed edits in its most recent draft, the January 2022 draft. However, NMOGA has a proposal for a second sentence in B1. If you look at B1 on the screen, their second sentence would be, unless otherwise specified in this part, monitoring is required to commence upon the date that the associated control requirements become effective. And they say they're proposing this in case some applicability date has been missed in this enormous rule.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. We'll take a minute for our board members to look at the proposed text. And just
That seems reasonable to me. That proposed addition from NMOGA or NMOGA.
thank you, Member Cates. Any other discussion from the board or give you a minute? Yes, Member Bitzer?
Would concur with Member Cates that it looks entirely reasonable.
Yes, Member Honker?
Just a question for the hearing officer. I don't see any language from NMED addressing Namoga's proposed addition, so I just want to make sure there wasn't any that we're not aware of.
Thank you, Member Honker.
No, thank you, Member Hunker. I did not see anything specifically from NMED opposing this. NMED had made a general statement that to the extent they didn't incorporate something, you should understand that they oppose it. But this is possibly a late breaking proposal from Namoga. It would take me a bit to figure out exactly the first time they proposed this.
Yes, Member Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I agree with Member Cates and others. It appears to bring more clarity. However, I would ask Member Trujillo Davis, upon the date that the associated control requirements become effective, it seems obvious that that's what has to happen, that this doesn't kick in until the associated control requirements become effective. That seems to be without saying, but do you know why they would have proposed to add it? Just because you know more about this, this equipment?
I think the answer is actually less about the type of equipment and more about clarification on when it actually comes into effect and any changes that need to be or basically the time frame that they're working within. Because if I remember correctly during this discussion, it had to do with default times, and so there was some concern that it might default to a sooner date. I'd have to go back and look in my notes for that, but I think that was the issue. It was a point of clarification for time frame.
I appreciate that. With that, I don't have a problem with that addition, that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Garcia and Vice Chair Trujillo Davis. If there's any other discussion on this entire board, if not, entertain a motion on this. So on this one, so I think this is one where we have an addition here. So how would we do this, Ms. Solaria? Would we accept NMED's text and then amend it, or do the NMED text with the Namoga's addition?
I think that the motion can be to adopt section B based on the rationale offered by the department and Kinder Morgan with the revision proposed by Namoga based on Namoga's rationale.
Yes, Member Garcia?
Thank you. One other cautionary note is there's pretty standard requirements throughout the rule on monitoring requirements and record keeping. And so I'm not sure, I mean, that's just standard throughout the rule. I've seen it repeatedly over and over and over. So I'm not sure if Namoga is asking for it to be put in everywhere or not. Do you all that are you all have you seen that in other parts of the rule? I have. It's monitoring requirements and record keeping requirements are just sort of standard language throughout the rule.
Yes, Member Garcia, I do see that as well. So I think one of the discussion points, just in terms of consistency as well. If we have similar sections, but it's not in a referenced in those other sections, if I may say that. I don't know if any of the board members have any other discussion on this. Yes, Vice Chair Trujillo Davis.
I think if I'm understanding this correctly, Namoga's comment is insinuating that the monitoring dates are that they become effective are different than the associated control requirement dates becoming effective. And that's how I'm reading it. Does anybody have any clarification on that?
Give us a second there, Vice Chair Trujillo Davis, and look at it as well again. So I think I see, yes, Member Hunker.
Well, since Namoga has included the language unless otherwise specified in this part, it seems like if there's any other language that specifies when monitoring is required to commence elsewhere in the rule, then that would still stand. This would just fill the gap in case there was any question about when the monitoring was required to commence. That's the way I read it.
Yes, Member Garcia.
Thank you for that, Member Honker. I think that helps unless otherwise specified. I think that's a good point. So I'd be happy to propose a motion if we're at that point to include it.
Okay, and I just have one other question on this one, and I apologize getting into the details here. So my other question is, so as it's written or proposed by Namoga, it says unless otherwise specified in this part, monitoring is required to commence. So it's just talking about monitoring. Is that unless otherwise specified, the term monitoring, I guess I'm getting myself wrapped around, it's not limited to monitoring. Again, we have monitoring, testing, or inspection requirements. So in my read, monitoring, testing, or inspection requirements is all under the umbrella of monitoring, the term monitoring. And therefore would apply to this. So monitoring would include testing, inspection requirements, and then the word monitoring. I guess I feel like we keep using monitoring for different terms. And I just want to make sure that we're not putting more monitoring terms in here where it's not needed. Yes, Member Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's already in the NMED proposed language. In addition to any monitoring requirements specified. So the only thing they're adding, well, I don't know. That's how I interpret it. That it's not any different from what they're already saying, except that they're talking about to commence upon the date that the associated control requirements become effective.
Is there any gap when the control requirements become effective from so in the text itself, as proposed by the department, there's no, under item B1, there's no, I guess, commencement. There's no start date. And maybe that's Namoga's point, but I don't see, is there any other area? I'm again looking to members of the board that I'm missing. If I'm missing something that where we actually, where the proposed regulation rules text state where it's proposed, where it's required to commence monitoring. Because I don't see it here.
Right,
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I also don't know if that's a gap, and I must say, I don't recall the discussion about this. And when I read this yesterday, I couldn't find any in my notes, any notes about this. So this might be a late addition by Namogan. It just seems obvious that it is going to kick in when the requirements become effective.
Exactly. And I just want to make sure that we're not going to conflict with other times when monitoring is kicked in. All monitoring occurs when the control requirements become effective. Is that there's no other monitoring prior to when control requirements become effective? I haven't seen that. I just want to make sure with members of the board. Because I don't see it, but I just want to make sure we're not conflicting ourselves.
Well, Madam Chair, it seems, it seems potentially useful and innocuous at worst. So I think it does no harm to include it.
Okay. Yes, Vice Chair Trujillo Davis.
I think I'll propose the question this way. Based on Namoga's statements, is there an monitoring applicability date? And if there is, then the statement's not needed. And if there isn't, then we probably should consider it.
Right, right. And I don't see it. I've been going back and forth like Member Garcia, just trying to do some homework prior to this. I have not seen that applicability date, but I just wanted to double check that I didn't miss something.
Madam Chair, it might also be because this proposal wasn't made during the hearing, it was made as part of a post-hearing submittal. It may also be wise to address a question to Ms. Soloria about whether the board can include a general applicability date at this point.
Thank you for that, Madam Hearing Officer. So with that, Ms. Solaria, do you have any thoughts on this discussion?
I would phrase my concern in the sense that if it wasn't brought up during the hearing and parties didn't have an opportunity to oppose it, to bring their own evidence to bear on it, I think that would undercut the board's authority to impose that type of requirement for a number of reasons. Just for the opportunity for the sake of the other parties' rights to present their own evidence on it, and also that it wasn't noticed in the proposed rule. So there are a couple issues there.
Thank you, Ms. Solaria. Appreciate that. With that additional discussion, do members of the board have other comments?
Well, Chair Swin, I would say, I said it struck me as innocuous, and that's not a good enough reason to add it, and especially after hearing from council. So I'd be inclined to not include it.
Yes, Vice Chair Trujillo Davis.
Given the information that it came in post-hearing submittals, I'm also in agreement with Member Cates that I don't think it's necessary to add.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trujillo Davis. Could we entertain a motion or further discussion? What's the pleasure of the board? Yes, Member Garcia?
I'll take a stab at a motion, but since there's not any supporting documentation by NMED, this one's a little more tricky. Let me take a stab at it. I would move that the board retain the original language proposed by NMED and reject the addition proposed by NMOGA because the language proposed by NMED is supported by evidence already established by NMED.
Thank you, Member Garcia, for taking that stab. And so I just want to, before we have any other, well, maybe a second or I don't know what, but at this point, Ms. Solaria, I did want to get your thoughts on how our board is going to frame this, given that we had this proposal and how we address the statement of reason for not adding NMOGA's proposal, because we don't have for additional discussion in writing with NMED from NMED.
I would phrase the first part of the motion to adopt section B as offered by the department based on the department's rationale and supportive rationale offered by Kinder Morgan, and to reject the proposal by NMOGA as it was not presented during the hearing. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Ms. Solaria. Member Garcia, what do you think about Ms. Solaria's suggestion?
Okay, let me try this again. So I would move that we adopt B 1 and 2 for the reasons stated by NMED and supported by Kinder Morgan, and not adopt the proposed language by NMOGA because it was not supported with evidence during the hearing.
Second.
Thank you, Member Garcia, and thank you for your second, Member Honker. Is there any further
I think
discussion?
that was Member Cates.
Oh, sorry, Member Cates.
He beat me to the buzzer.
Thank you.
Give credit where credit's due.
There you go. There you go. So just for record clarification, it was a motion by Member Garcia and a second by Member Cates. With that, if there's no further discussion, Ms. Jones, would you mind doing a roll call vote on this?
Yes. Member Bitzer, how do you vote?
Oh, yes.
Member Cates?
Yes.
Member Garcia?
Yes.
Member Honker?
Yes.
Vice Chair Trujillo Davis?
Yes.
Chair Sweeney?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes with one member absent.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. All right. That takes us to item C. That's section 20.2.50.112, section C. That we're at, and I'm just scrolling down. And it looks like we have agreement between the department and NMOGA on this. Yes, Vice Chair Trujillo Davis.
I was actually kind of hoping that I just discuss real quick the evening plans. If we're gonna push through, would the board be opposed to taking like a half-hour dinner break, or something like that?
Thank you, Vice Chair Trujillo Davis. I think we have a stop at 6 o'clock. I don't know if that factors into the timing here, and all our our dinner for our families and ourselves. But yeah, what do you think?
Oh, that sounds good. I guess I was stuck in the mindset of when we were doing hearing and we went to like 8 o'clock one night. I just wanted to see if we could factor that in if we were gonna go late. So 6 o'clock sounds fine to me.
Great. And just one check is any, I know we had a quick 5-minute break because we wanted member Duval to hang on as long as possible. Does anybody need a quick break before we hit this last about an hour and so minutes? Are we good to go?
I'd say let's do a quick break. I mean, it doesn't have to be too long, but
Okay.
quick bio run.
Yes. So we're looking at 5 minutes. Is that good? Okay. We'll come back here at 4:50. Thank you. There we are. All right. Okay, let me jump back to mine. Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. We're in section C. Right? Yes, C. Record keeping requirements. Make sure we're here. Great. Okay. And I see NMOGA has agrees and appreciates the clarification. So it doesn't look like there's any opposition to NMED's, the department's text on C 1, 2, and 3. And please, again, board members, check me, and if there's not any comments, discussions, we'll entertain a motion here. Yes, Member Hunker?
Yes, I move we adopt section C as proposed by NMED, with NMED's supporting rationale and support from NMOGA.
Let's second that.
Thank you, Member Hunker. Member Bitzer? I'm just checking if there's any further discussion on this. If not, Ms. Jones, would you please do a roll call vote?
Yes, Member Bitzer,
I vote aye.
Member Cates, Member Garcia,
Yes.
Member Honker,
Yes.
Vice Chair Trujillo Davis,
Yes.
Chair Sweeney. Madam Chair, the motion passes with one member absent.
Thank you, Ms. Jones, appreciate it. And,
Madam
great,
Chair?
yes,
Oh, I'm sorry, this is Felicia. If I might, I think I can give you a thumbnail here. Section D is in dog, the last section of section 112. You have NMED's proposal, GCA's support, NMOGA encouraging you to assure that it does not extend beyond the CDR. IPA&M proposing to delete D in its entirety, and Wild Earth Guardians proposing to add 2 paragraphs. So there's a fair number of positions on paragraph D.
thank you for that verbal summary, Madam Hearing Officer, that's helpful. All right, so it looks like even on this, sorry, I'm scrolling here again to remind myself of this section. We have quite a bit of discussion amongst the parties on this. And thank you again, Madam Hearing Officer, for compiling this. As Madam Hearing Officer mentioned, this is the last one in section 112. Did anybody, let me go back up there. Okay. So it looks just like one paragraph, but we have a great deal of parties chiming in on this particular paragraph. Anybody wants to jump in?
I'll jump in. It's really a question, I think, for the hearing officer. Namoga's comments about if extended beyond the CDR is what they're really saying is that their opposition to the Wild Earth Guardians proposed language. I just am not sure how to interpret Namoga's language there.
Let's see here. Well, they certainly oppose the deviation reporting, which is the crux of the Guardians proposal addition. They mention the words requested expansion in the department's January red line. And I had actually found that ambiguous because I wondered if they were actually suggesting that the department was expanding beyond the CDR. But I certainly don't see an expansion beyond the CDR here. It on its face seems to refer specifically to the CDR. So I think Namoga is referring in its opposition not to the department, but to the deviation reporting requested by Wild Earth Guardian. This is, however, a direct quote from their post-hearing submittal. So this is what we have from Namoga.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. That's helpful. And so we have, I think, that discussion or that various viewpoints from Namoga and Wild Earth Guardians, and then we have IPA&M proposes to delete the section in its entirety. But other than making sure, and then we have, okay. So just for my clarification, Madam Hearing Officer, so basically it looks like NMOGA is providing that opposition to the Wild Earth Guardians proposal as identified here in the summary report.
That's my understanding
Okay.
as I look at their language. And of course, they join the department in that. The department also opposes the Guardian's deviation reporting. And there might have been another party as well, GCA. So NMED, NMOGA, and GCA have all weighed in opposing the Guardian's proposal.
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, Member Bitzer? Yes.
My heartburn would focus on page 80 in the hard copy, where IPA talks about how the date stamp requirement's going to be due on April 2nd. But the software that the department will approve isn't even going to be known until January 1st. So it says they've got what, 4 months? I think they're overestimating. That's actually 3 months, all of January, February, and March. And you're only 2 days into April, so 3 days and 2 months, or 3 months and 2 days. And we've seen throughout the testimony, and I remember hearing that this was not simple, especially for small operators. Some of the big ones may already have this software in place. But that 4 months, they said 4 months just wasn't enough time. Just down below the middle of that page 80. And I'm wondering if it would be possible to grant an extension here instead of April 2nd, maybe say June 30th or July 1st. So they have 6 months.
Member Bitzer, that may have already been changed.
I was reading this recently. That's something that jumped out at me. Maybe it's touched on elsewhere.
Yeah, let's see here.
It says right there in the last sentence, Member Bitzer, if the department requests a CDR for additional time will be given as appropriate. I don't know if that addresses, Madam Hearing Officer, is that what you were going to point out? I apologize if I spoke over you.
Yeah, no, that is what I had in mind. I just couldn't read it fast enough.
Do we know if there's a reason why they have to stick with April 2nd?
Member Bitzer, and I'm just looking at my notes. I do recall this coming up in the hearing, and this was about the hard date, and then this additional text to have that flexibility, so that some of the small businesses could adjust. And so I just recall that conversation. I haven't noted here in my notes. I don't, and it looks like, and maybe this is a question for Madam Hearing Officer, on IPA&M's proposed deletion. Was that after the hearing submittals? I mean, after our hearing as well? Because I wasn't sure if they still felt that even with that language, it didn't give them that flexibility, or there was still that concern.
So I believe, Madam Chair, the dates have already been extended in other sections, and of course I think this is old information basically that was included in the IPA&M closing argument. There may have been some movement by the department, for example, right after they reflected on IPNM's proposal. There was discussion of all of this at the hearing. You can see referenced in the closing argument the various citations to transcripts for the testimony. Let's see here. It might take me a little bit though to track down where these other dates are. If that's going to be important to your deliberations, Member Bitzer, it may be good just to give me a little bit of time to find the other dates.
That's all right. I just wanted to point that out because the additional room in the proposed language is itself fairly ambiguous, that we would additional time will be given as appropriate. Sort of that puts somebody behind the curtain, if you will, in charge of deciding what qualifies as appropriate. So, but anyway, no, it's not worth slowing us down for.
Thank you for that discussion though, Member Bitzer. Know if other members have any other comments regarding either IPA&M's statements or others. And it looks to me, I guess the starting point, of course, is we have the departments, and then whether or not it is, I think maybe with IPA&M's proposal to delete in its entirety as maybe one decision point. And then and then if we don't do that, then we have also IPA&M's concern about, as Member Bitzer brought up, about the timing, but it's actually not in those dates are not in here in this particular section. Anyways, go ahead, Member Honker.
Yeah, I don't find IPA&M's arguments to be compelling. They seem to be talking about other stuff that's not in the section that we're considering here. So it seems like there's some somewhat irrelevant stuff in the argument. So I'm in favor of keeping the section in there.
Madam Chair, I
Yes.
can point you to one specific place and scroll to it if you'd like. The GPS requirement date is in 112A8B. You remember when we went through A3 through 9? And the date now is 2 years from the effective date, not April 2nd, 2023. Again, I can scroll back to that if you'd like, or you can find it on the hard copy at page 59 and 60. In particular, page 60, about 2/3 of the way down the page. 8B.
Yes, I see that. So, 8B, I just want to read it out real quick. Certain sections of this part require a date and timestamp, including a GPS display at the location for certain monitoring events. no later than 1 year from the effective date of this part. The department shall finalize a list of approved technologies to comply with date and timestamp requirements, shall post the approved list on the website. Owners and operators shall comply with this requirement using an approved technology no later than 2 years from the effective date of this part. So I hope that clarifies it for the board a little bit on IPA&M's discussion under section B. Is that helpful? Thank you for that, Madam Hearing Officer.
I'm sorry, Madam Hearing Officer. Could you repeat that?
Yes, sir. If you look at the hard copy, it would take me, I think, too long to scroll here, but if you look at the
Yeah.
hard copy of attachment A on page
Mhm.
60, about 2/3 the way down the page in bold, paragraph 8, subparagraph B, you'll see that the effective date for the GPS requirements is 2 years from the effective date of this rule, which will be not April 2023.
Well,
So
then,
my guess,
yeah. I was going to
Oh,
say,
so
how
I'm
do
sorry.
we, so the rule seems to be contradict itself on this point. So how would we go about fixing that?
No, I'm sorry, Member Cates. I don't believe the rule is contradicting itself. I believe what happened is, again, the department displayed a lot of energy around edits and adjustments to its provisions based on comments from industry, and based in particular on comments from industry that April 2023 was too soon to meet the provisions of this section that's up on the screen, and the GPS requirements in 112A8B. They moved it later, and we don't have then. IPA&M is proposing, right, to delete this section in its entirety, but the portion of IPA&M's final arguments around why the deletion is necessary include an argument that's moot now. But at least that part of the argument is moot now, because that April 2023 compliance deadline simply isn't in the rule in this case.
Oh, okay, got it. Thank you.
Yes, Member Garcia?
Yes, thank you. I just have a procedural question for Council Soloria. So I know there are, we've gone through this once before, and there are several items that come up like this where there's a section where parties agree with NMED, and then there may be proposed new language. There may be a piece here and there where somebody wants to change language. And my question is, do we need to go through each item that a party brings up and vote on it? Or if we were to adopt the rule as written with SOR, would that by default mean that we are rejecting those other proposals? Or do we need to go through each proposal and vote?
I'll give you a piece, a complicated answer to that question. If you're going to vote to accept the language that the department has proposed, and that motion, then you would by default, as you stated, reject any deletions or additions. The purpose of going into more detail about the parties' arguments is in consideration of the board's preference of how detailed you want the statement of reasons to be. So there should be a reason for your vote. And so, for example, in this case where there's various parties' positions, you can state that you're adopting one party's position based on that party's associated rationale. But it may be because of the particular context of the arguments raised, the particular content of those arguments, that you would want to explicitly say, we're rejecting the rationale proposed as proposed by whatever party. There has been a pattern that's emerged as you all have been going, where that's somewhat simpler if the party has proposed a revision, especially in the context, a deletion, especially in the context where the department has offered in their own rationale a reason to reject that revision. So by adopting the department's rationale, you've also referenced why you should reject that party's revision. So it's sort of on a case by case. I think that the pattern you've developed is a sound one, but just be open to the possibility that the context of the particular provision you're examining may require more detail in what you want to include in the statement of reasons.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Council Solaria. Appreciate that. And I also appreciate that we have case by case basis, unique aspects for each subsection that we're looking at as well, in terms of responses and timing and so forth. So if members of the board and legal counsel and supporting input can remind us when we need to make sure we're consistent and we're clear on our statement of reasons when we need to have that additional detail. That would help the record on our decisions. All right. With that said, I think Member Cates, does a clarification by Madam Hearing Officer address some of the confusion here? Just to kind of wrap that one up, it looks like IPA&M in some of the comments in the here regarding timing seem to be mute at this point, because it was addressed by the department in terms of what Member Bitzer mentioned earlier about January 2023 being approved technologies, and then having the April 2nd, 2023. That is actually not a concern given the most recent proposed version by the department. In other sections, I should say. Does that help, Member Cates, on that, and Member Bitzer on your concern as well?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. All right. So with that, do we have any further discussion regarding the department's language and also some of the other comments by the other parties?
Madam Chair, I'll scroll down to the deviation language proposed by Wild Earth Guardians for this section, if that's what you'd like.
Yes, just so that we can keep the conversation going on this. I know this is one where we have a number of parties commenting. So on this one, we see Wild Earth Guardians with this additional language. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Hearing Officer, I think this was addressed in NMEDs. Oh, no, it was not. addressed.
Oh, Madam Chair, it was addressed below this proposal because which I formatted it that way because it was proposing a new section. So I can scroll down to the department's opposition if you'd like. Hold on. There it is
Thank you.
in the hard, yeah, in the hard copy.
It's page 85, about 2/3 of the way down.
Thank you.
I wanted to comment on that, when the time is right. I am, I'm feeling the state here on this one. So Guardians are asking for deviations reports that include stuff like work practice standards, and my sympathies are tilting toward the state here. It talks about where they talk about the inherent ambiguities in the language that Guardians is using there, and I'm reading here, and would create unclear expectations and pose implementation challenges. So to me, that's a place that we probably best not go.
Thank you for that. Is any other discussion on it? Yes, Member Honker?
Yeah, I agree with Member Cates. I thought NMED's arguments against this language were pretty well thought out and very good points. So I think I agree that we should not adopt this additional language.
Thank you, Member Honker. Any other discussion? Yes, Member Garcia.
Yes, observation, and also I note that GCA supports not including that language as well. I think NMED is the one that has to enforce this ultimately, and they know the sticking points they're going to come across by enforcing language that is ambiguous. So so I would not support including that language.
Thank you, Member Garcia. And so it sounds like we're members of the board are leaning toward not including or not including or entertaining Wild Earth Guardians proposed language. Is that what I'm hearing? And I know we'll make an official motion, action on this, but I'm just trying to take a pulse as we navigate this particular section. So given that, it looks like we have, if that's where we're leaning toward, we have NMED, the department's proposed language, and then GCA supporting, also industry not supporting the amendment proposed by Wild Earth Guardians. And then I think all that we are missing is I think NMOGA's additional. So NMOGA said on NMED's original proposed language that NMED agreed that it will give additional time if multiple facility CDRs are requested. Yes, thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. If you can go back up. There we go. So I'm on NMOGA's summary of their response. So I don't know if we want to focus on that. I think we've kind of hammered through most of the other points. Yes, Member Garcia.
To try to propose a motion.
Sure.
Say try. This is a tricky one. So I move to adopt section D as written by enemy D for the reasons given by enemy D, specifically rejecting the proposal by IPNM to delete section D because it is no longer necessary considering the accommodation on dates that enemy D made. Also rejecting the proposal by Wild Earth Guardians for a new definition or new description of reporting requirements under D, with reasons being for evidence submitted by the department's Mr. Baca and Ms. Hollenberg.
Thank
Second
you.
that.
Thank you, Member Garcia. I apologize. I spoke over the member that was seconding. Who was that? Member Bitzer.
Madam Chair, this is one of the instances where there were supportive parties rationale for both the department's language and against Wild Earth Guardian's proposal. Can I take a stab at a revised motion based on Member Garcia's description?
Thank you, Council Solaria. That would be great.
So this is a complicated one, but the motion would be to adopt the department's language based on rationale offered by the department and GCA and NMOGA's rationale in support, and to reject Wild Earth Guardian's proposed language based on the same party's rationale, and to delete IPANM's proposal as moot.
Thank you. Member Garcia, are you good with that?
But that doesn't address Wild Earth Guardian, so I need to do that in a separate motion.
I did insert that it would be to reject Wild Earth Guardian's proposed language based on the same party's rationale. And when I said same parties, it was because I referenced the department, TCA, and NMOGA prior to that, because they also, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Well, maybe right. I think they were also in support of rejecting. I'm sorry, I might have overcomplicated this. Did I overread that?
You are correct. GCA NMOGA did support, from my reading, I'm looking at NMOGA's right now, and did support not Wild Earth Guardian's proposal, and then GCA as well, I believe.
Correct.
I'm sorry, GCA what? You faded off, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, that GCA as well did support not not adopting or including Wild Earth Guardian's proposal.
Anyone else want to take a stab? Go right ahead, because my brain is very tired.
Should I repeat that and then go from there?
Yes.
Okay. The motion is to adopt the department's language based on the rationale offered by the department, as well as GCA and NMOGA's rationale in support, and to reject Wild Earth Guardian's proposed language based on the same party's rationale, and to delete IPANM's proposal as moot.
Okay, here goes.
You can just adopt that motion if.
Oh,
it
wonderful.
satisfies you.
Thank you. I would like to adopt that motion as stated by council. Thank you very much. I would propose that motion as stated by council.
I'll second.
Thank you, Member Cates and Member Garcia. If there's no other discussion, Ms. Jones, could you do a roll call vote on Member Garcia's motion?
Yes. Member Bitzer, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Okay. Member Cates,
Yes.
Member Garcia,
Yes.
Member Honker,
Yes.
Vice Chair Trujillo Davis,
Yes.
Chair Sweeney.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, and thank you, all the board members for wading through that section. Appreciate it, and Member Garcia and Member Cates for your motions. So we're on, and correct me if I'm wrong, because my brain is getting there toward the end here. 20.2.50.113 engines and turbines. Great.
Madam Chair, Pam has to drop off, so Ms. Corral, also with the department will, or with the Office of Public Facilitation, will be conducting the votes. She just wanted me to
Okay.
know that.
Thank you so much and have a good evening, Pam. Thank you for your help and support today. All right. There we go.
So it looks like there's no opposition to that piece, unless I'm reading this wrong.
Oh, and I think we can keep going. So we have subsection A, B.
Well, B1, I think, is unopposed, but I think on B2, there is some other proposed language by the National Park Service.
Yes.
So I would move that we adopt section 113A and B1 as proposed by NMED for the reasons supported by NMED's rationale.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Member Honker and Member Bitzer for the motion. Is there any discussion regarding this? If not, look to Ms. Corral, if you could do our roll call vote for us.
Yes. Member Bitzer, how do you vote?
Oh, yes.
Member Cates?
Yes.
Member Duval? Member Garcia?
Yes.
Member Honker?
Yes.
Vice Chair Trujillo Davis?
Yes.
Chair Sweeney?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you for your support on that roll call vote. So we're on section, let me see. B,
113 B2 B2, excuse me. And I just wanted to interject, Madam Chair, that I have it on this screen so that you can see the entirety of subsection 2. And I'll read from a later page the proposal from the National Park Service, which is to add a subsection E as in Edward here. Companies shall maintain a plan that demonstrates how the owner or operator will meet the emission standards as outlined in the schedule above.
Thank you for that, Ms. Orth. I appreciate that. Okay. And just in terms of a check on this, Ms. Orth, I just wanted to note, so the National Park Service proposed that new paragraph, and I apologize if I missed it. Did NMED or NAMOGA provide response to that?
I didn't see arguments going either way, and without being able to guarantee this, I believe this may have been a another late breaking, suggestion in the closing argument red line, because typically, if it was not late breaking, NMED certainly would have addressed it. I mean, they usually would have addressed it. And other parties might have addressed it as well, but I didn't see arguments from any side.
Thank you, Ms. Orth, for that additional information. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yes, Member Bitzer?
Oh, I'm a little concerned that if we rejected something else earlier based on the fact that it was a Johnny come lately, at least in part, because it came very late, too late to have been publicly noticed. That was council's concern, that we should be consistent, or at least should lean towards being consistent, unless there's some compelling reason why we need to adopt the Park Service's recommendation. Otherwise, we open ourselves up.
And if I can ask a follow-up question to the hearing officer. So when you say late breaking, that's it. I take that to mean that it wasn't discussed in the hearing in chief, and it was only it was proposed for the first time in the party's final submission.
Yes, thank you for clarifying, Ms. Deloria. That is what I was trying to convey.
And so, to Member Bitzer's point, I think my earlier comments stand. I guess I think a public notice issue is part of it, but more so that evidence wasn't brought to bear on this issue during no party had an opportunity to both support it in evidence or oppose it in evidence during the hearing, and I think that might be a little bit outside of the board's power to consider based on that late presentation.
Well, a question, Chair Sweeney. I guess a question for the hearing officer, I guess. Does this also apply to the revisions in the table that National Park Service and CEP is asking for?
No, I was only referring to their proposed new section E as in Edward right here in subparagraph 2. We'll get to the tables next.
Well, I'm a fan of the National Park Service, of course, but I think I'm in line with Chairman Bitzer and the comments he made on this particular point as well.
Thank you, Member King. Appreciate that. And I think Ms. Solaria, I appreciate your clarifying some of the discussion points that we had earlier regarding the other sections. And I just want to double check again for the record that was similar to what we had discussed. I mean, similar circumstances regarding our previous items, and maybe it's a question from our Madam Hearing Officer on that, where we had not consider or not included some of the proposals that were in the last submittal and didn't go through the hearing process. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
And you'll recall, Madam Chair, that I believe the last section where this was raised, the proffered rationale for rejecting it was that there was no evidence in the record to support it, which if it wasn't discussed at the hearing would be the case.
Thank you, Council Solaria. That's helpful. Member Hunker, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just wanted to agree with Member Cates and Member Bitzer. And additionally, this would require a plan. It sounds like it would require a document that is not currently required by the rule. That would be an additional burden on the regulated community, which has not been, thoroughly discussed by all parties as we discussed. So I agree not to include it.
Thank you, Member Hunker. Yes, Vice Chair Trujillo Davis.
Yes, I'd like to also agree with my fellow board members here, and Member Honker makes a valid. Oh, look at that! My dinner right here delivered. Look at that! I'll show him later. But I think that the point Member Honker makes about the plan itself, it lacks clarity that many of the parties did not get to weigh in on. What are the contents of that plan? What is the expectation of that plan? And not only does it place some of that responsibility on the department to do something with, but it places responsibility on them to create a new structure that hasn't previously been discussed.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trujillo Davis. Appreciate that input. So with that said, I think we go back to the original department's language as proposed. And then just ensure that we take into consideration the MOGA's comments and make sure I didn't miss anything or we didn't miss anything in terms of something we need to consider in NAMOGA's comments. Yes, looks like am I missing anything? I don't see there's any opposition. It's just clarification. So please double check me, fellow board members. And Madam Hearing Officer, maybe this will be a question for you. As the start of that paragraph, NAMOGA provides supporting history. Is that also right there? Yes. And that's providing supporting history for the
SOR, yes.
Got it. Just making sure we're all clear. Same thing. Yes, Member Hunker?
Yeah, and I think the question would be, since some of NAMOGA's discussion has to do with the tables, do we want to take action on section B2 above the tables, and then there's more issues on the tables, more discussion on the tables in the following pages. So do we want to keep rolling on this, or do we want to kind of address this Park Service proposal and then go on to the tables with a separate consideration.
Sure. What's the, I'm good with that, or members, fellow board members, if you have any opposition or support of Member Hunker's suggestion. Good. So with that, Member Hunker, what do you, so are you saying to make a motion on, I lost my, oh, here we are. B2, A, B, C, D. And then also in that motion, address the proposed B2E in one motion and then go to the table. Is that what I was hearing?
Well, that is more of a question than a proposal. I mean, I'd be comfortable going on to the tables, but this is going to be tough to keep all the pieces, kind of like the last section. When it comes to making a decision, we've got to keep all these pieces in it. So,
so we would open up discussion on table 1 as well. And yes, Member Garcia?
Yes, just for clarification, maybe this is a question for the hearing officer. It appears to me, going through what she's written up here, I'm not seeing, I'm seeing a lot of opposition to the proposal by the Park Service, but I'm not seeing, so it looks like, and this just supports the, SOR. So I'm not sure that we need to break it up because unless I'm missing something, Madam Hearing Officer, it looks like all of this discussion is really saying why many of NMED and many parties do not want to include the Park Service language.
So, Member Garcia, I called attention to this right here, the new paragraph B2E, because it stood alone. It was a proposal. The company shall maintain a plan that demonstrates how they're going to meet the emission standards, and it was a late proposal, and there were no arguments on it. And I thought it'd be a fairly quick discussion for the board to say whether they wanted to include it or not. The discussion around the tables is going to be more elaborate. You have the tables proposed by NMED and largely supported by industry. Then you have tables proposed jointly between the community and environment parties and the National Park Service. CEP there is an acronym for Community Environment Parties. And around the emission standards for both engines and turbines. It might be easier when you get to the tables. And by the way, all of the tables are part of section 2. So Member Hunker's suggestion that you just sort of finish the discussion with the tables before, making a wrap-up motion, I think is a good one, because these are section 2 tables for engines and for turbines, and you have different tables to consider. This coming discussion around the tables is going to be reasonably intricate.
For that clarification, I appreciate you pointing that out. You're absolutely right. We probably do need to go with Member Honker's suggestion.
Thank you for that.
I'm hearing, officer, one other observation, considering the time, we could deal with the NPS proposal and then if we get into the other part, which is more complicated, it may go beyond, well beyond 6. So that's something to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Garcia. What is the pleasure of the board? Do we want to maybe just address that one aspect and then, yeah, as Member Garcia said, I think if we look at the other tables, we're going to have a further discussion beyond 10 minutes. Yes, Member Hunker?
Yes, I agree. So I will move that we disapprove the National Park Service proposal to add a new paragraph B2E because it was not thoroughly discussed or considered during the hearing process.
Thank you,
Second that.
Member. Thank you, Member Bitzer, for your second. With that, is there any further discussion? If not, Ms. Corral, if you would do a roll call vote on Member Honker's motion.
Member Bitzer, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Member Katz? Member Katz? Yes? Okay. Member Garcia?
Yes.
Member Honker?
Yes.
Vice Chair Trujillo Davis?
Yes.
Chair Sweeney?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Corral. I appreciate your assistance on there. And I just wanted for the record to clarify that Member Cates did have a thumbs up on that. And with that, I know we've got 8 minutes.
Madam Chair, I think for the sake of completeness and the record, since we're at, I don't think we had a motion to approve the language at 2A through D, unless I missed that. So if we could go ahead and do that.
Yes, that would be fine. Member Hunker?
Okay, I will move we approve the language of, let me get back to it. Section B2, A through D, reserving consideration of the tables based on the rationale provided by NMED and supported by NMOGA.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Member Honker and Member Bitzer for your second. Is there any discussion from our board members? If not, Ms. Corral, would you mind doing another roll call vote on Member Honker's motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. Member Bitzer, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Member Katz?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Garcia?
Yes.
Member Hunker?
Yes.
Vice Chair Trujillo Davis?
I'm sorry, I have a quick question. I was just double checking this and it appears that the language is in direct reference to the table. So should we consider them as one?
Thank you for that, Member Trujillo Davis. And I don't know what we think here. I know we started going down the roll call vote. And so what do members think before we finish out voting? I know you voted.
Chair Sweeney, are you talking to me, Chair Sweeney?
I'm talking to all the members. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Yes, Member Honker?
Well, just to clarify, I reserved consideration of the tables. So
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
we're not part of the motion. I guess the question is, in discussion of the tables, could we be pointed back to the language preceding the tables? And I don't know the answer to that. We'll know that when we get there. So I was just responding to council's suggestion that we go ahead and address the language preceding the tables.
Yes, and my suggestion may or may not have been misguided, but in any case, I think Member Honker's reservation of consideration of the table resolved any issue with that suggestion, since the board is reserving consideration of the content of the tables themselves.
Thank you, Ms. Soloria. And Member Garcia, yes, before.
Yes, I just wasn't clear. I think we're all getting tired. I just wasn't clear in Member Honker's. I think I'm too close. I just wasn't clear in Member Honker's motion that there was an explicit rejection of the Park Service proposed language. So I don't know if that was.
We already took a vote on rejecting that.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Okay, thank you.
I guess.
Go ahead, Member Honker.
A question for council. So as we discuss the tables tomorrow, if it becomes apparent, we should reconsider some of the language in the A through D. Can we go back to that, or if we make a decision now, is that irrevocable?
I think we could go back to that because the deliberations would still be open. But if it's cleaner, recognizing that my earlier suggestion was perhaps a product of fatigue, we could just retract the motion and we could take it all up as one or tomorrow, however the board desires. I didn't mean to complicate things.
Thank you for that, legal counsel. Appreciate that. And I think we're all getting tired. So with that, members of the board, and I appreciate that, Vice Chair Trujillo Davis, for your question, even though it was through roll call voting, that we just maybe table it to tomorrow morning when we've gotten some good shut-eye, rest our brains a little, walked around. What do you all think?
I will retract my motion.
Thank you, Member Honker. All right. Ms. Soloria, just making sure we don't miss anything as we have a couple more minutes for our deliberations today. Oh, can't hear you.
I don't want to take up too much of the board's time for the rest of the evening, and perhaps we could have a conversation, you and I, offline. But I have received more pushback regarding deliberations running into Saturday. As I relayed, and I certainly don't mean to beat this, but as I relayed in my description this morning, I do think it was fairly late notice to the parties that we would be potentially deliberating on Saturday. And as we saw today, there is utility to having the parties being able to attend these deliberations live, considering that they've caught at least one issue where there was simply an error, which in the report regarding what had already been accepted by the department. And that's just, you know, by reasons of this being a very lengthy and detailed report that was just going to happen. So I just wanted to reiterate that, to communicate that I've received that information, that the preference of the department, and also I would suspect other parties, but obviously not speaking for them, would be to have a block of days to continue deliberations a little bit further out, especially because it's apparent, I don't think we're gonna finish on Saturday anyway. But I'll leave, that's obviously within the board's discretion and preference, and I'll leave it at that, and we can perhaps discuss that in more detail tomorrow to see where we're at.
Thank you, legal counsel. And so I'm looking to our board members. Do you think maybe a good night's sleep to think about how today went and look at our schedules, and then we'll have member Duval back in the morning as well. And Ms. Solaria, maybe just open up, or I don't know if we can, I want to again be very mindful of making sure we're dotting all the i's, crossing all the t's on this, and being compliant.
Right.
So I know member Duval's not here. Is there a way we could get this discussion point maybe first thing in the morning when he's also online?
Sure. And, you know, just the concluding point that I think everyone involved would rather us do this, not only get it done, but get it done right. So it's just, again, something to sleep on.
Thank you so much. Are we good with that, members? Thumbs up. I just want to thank everybody. I know this has been overwhelming, and we could, you know, getting toward the end here. I was getting tired. I was forgetting what page I was on, what section I was on. But I just appreciate everybody's due diligence and your attention. And I think although it's taken some time, I think once we get our legs underneath us again tomorrow, we'll make some good progress. With that, thank you all again, and we'll see you in the morning. And appreciate everybody's attendance, and those also watching our deliberations. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you in the morning.
Thanks. Good night.